Marcus Romano sat in the corner booth of his father's restaurant, pushing food around his plate with obvious disgust. The 25-year-old heir to the Romano crime family had developed a reputation that puzzled everyone who knew him. Despite having access to the finest chefs money could buy, Marcus refused to eat anything prepared by anyone in his father's organization. Vincent Romano, the feared head of the most powerful Mafia family in Chicago, watched his son from across the dining room. His weathered face showed concern mixed with frustration. Every chef he hired, every cook he brought in from Italy, every culinary expert he could find, Marcus rejected them all after one bite. "What's wrong with this one?" Vincent asked, approaching his son's table. The restaurant was empty except for family members and trusted associates, as it always was during their private dinners. Marcus looked up from his untouched plate of osso buco, prepared by Chef Alessandro, who had been flown in from Milan specifically for this meal. "It tastes like everything else they make, Papa. Like they're trying too hard to impress you instead of just cooking food." Vincent's jaw tightened. His son's eating habits had become a source of embarrassment. In their world, refusing food was seen as disrespectful, especially when prepared by someone trying to earn favor with the family. Word was spreading that the Romano heir was impossible to please, that he looked down on everyone's efforts. "You're making me look weak," Vincent said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of decades of authority. "These people think you're ungrateful." Marcus pushed his chair back and stood. "I'm not ungrateful. I'm just tired of eating food made by people who are more concerned with keeping their heads attached to their shoulders than actually cooking." The truth was more complicated than Marcus let on. Since childhood, he had been able to taste fear in food. Not literally, but he could sense when someone cooked with anxiety, desperation, or the need to please. It made everything taste artificial to him, like the emotions had somehow contaminated the ingredients. This unusual sensitivity had developed after a traumatic incident when he was 8 years old. A rival family had tried to poison him through a birthday cake, prepared by a terrified baker they had threatened. Though the plot was discovered before Marcus ate the cake, the experience had left him with an almost supernatural ability to detect when food was prepared under duress. Vincent didn't understand this, and Marcus had never been able to explain it properly. How do you tell your father, a man who rules through fear, that you can taste the terror of everyone who cooks for him? "Tomorrow night, we're hosting the Marcelli family," Vincent announced. "It's important business, and I need you there. I need you to eat whatever is served and show respect." Marcus nodded reluctantly. The Marcelli family controlled the docks, and Vincent needed their cooperation for a major shipment coming in from overseas. Any sign of disrespect could derail negotiations that had taken months to arrange. The next evening, Marcus arrived at Romano's, the upscale restaurant that served as the family's public face. The main dining room had been cleared for the meeting, with only the Marcelli family, the Romanos, and essential staff present. Giuseppe Marcelli, a man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes, greeted Vincent with practiced warmth. "Vincent, my friend, your restaurant looks magnificent as always." "Giuseppe, welcome. Please sit. We have an exceptional meal planned." As they settled around the large table, Marcus noticed the usual parade of nervous staff members bringing out course after course. Each dish was expertly prepared and beautifully presented, but Marcus could barely manage a few bites of each one. The familiar taste of anxiety and desperation permeated everything. Giuseppe Marcelli watched Marcus's behavior with interest. "Your son doesn't seem to enjoy the food, Vincent." Heat rose in Vincent's face. "Marcus has very particular tastes. I can see that." Giuseppe's tone carried a hint of amusement that made the situation even more uncomfortable. Marcus excused himself and headed to the kitchen, hoping to find something simple he could eat to avoid further embarrassment. The kitchen was in chaos, with Chef Alessandro barking orders at the staff while sweat poured down his face. "Where's the next course?" Alessandro shouted at a young woman standing near the service window. "The Marcellis are still waiting." The woman, who couldn't have been more than 22, had dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wore the plain black uniform of the waitstaff. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't her appearance, though she was undeniably beautiful, but her complete calmness in the midst of the kitchen chaos. "Chef, the soup needs 3 more minutes, or it won't be right," she said simply. "Would you rather serve them something perfect or something rushed?" Alessandro's face turned red. "You don't tell me about timing, waitress. You serve what I tell you to serve." The young woman didn't flinch. "Of course, chef. I'm just saying what I observed." Marcus stepped closer, intrigued by her composure. In his world, people either cowered in fear or puffed up with false bravado when challenged. This woman did neither. "Who are you?" Marcus asked. She turned to face him, and he noticed her eyes were a striking green color. "Elena Rossi. I work the evening shift." "How long have you been here?" 3 weeks. That explained why Marcus hadn't seen her before. The restaurant employed dozens of people, and the evening staff rarely interacted with family members during their private gatherings. "Do you cook?" Marcus found himself asking. Elena looked surprised. "A little. Nothing fancy. Just simple food." Something about the way she said it made Marcus curious. There was no false modesty, no attempt to impress him. She seemed to view cooking as a practical skill rather than an art form or a means of gaining approval. "Would you make me something?" The request surprised even Marcus. He had never asked a waitress to cook for him. Elena glanced around the busy kitchen. "What would you like?" "Whatever you want to make. Something simple." For a moment, Elena studied his face as if trying to understand why the son of Vincent Romano would make such an unusual request. Then she nodded. "I'll need about 15 minutes. Marcus found himself waiting in a quiet corner of the kitchen, watching Elena work. She moved with efficiency rather than flair, gathering simple ingredients: eggs, pasta, garlic, olive oil, and Parmesan cheese. No elaborate preparations, no shouting at other staff members, no nervousness despite having the boss's son watching her every move. She boiled water for the pasta while heating olive oil in a pan. The garlic went in just long enough to release its aroma before she cracked the eggs into a bowl and whisked them with cheese and black pepper. When the pasta was ready, she drained it and tossed everything together with practiced ease. "Carbonara," she said, placing the plate in front of him. "Nothing special, just food." Marcus took a bite, and for the first time in years, he tasted only the ingredients. No fear, no desperation, no attempt to impress. The eggs were creamy, the cheese sharp, the pepper providing just enough heat. It was simple, honest food made by someone who wasn't afraid of him or his father or anyone else in the building. He finished the entire plate without saying a word. When Elena turned back from cleaning her small workspace, she found Marcus staring at the empty dish with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Was it okay?" she asked. Marcus looked up at her. It was perfect. From the dining room came the sound of Vincent's voice calling for his son. The meeting was progressing, and Marcus's absence would be noticed soon. "I have to go back," Marcus said, standing. "But I want to talk to you again." Elena nodded, already turning back to her duties. She didn't ask why or what he wanted to talk about. She simply accepted his statement at face value, the same way she had accepted his unusual request for food. As Marcus returned to the dining room, Giuseppe Marcelli looked at him with renewed interest. "You look better, young man. Found something to eat in the kitchen?" "Yes," Marcus replied, taking his seat. "Something simple." For the rest of the evening, Marcus found his attention divided between the business discussion and thoughts of the calm young woman in the kitchen who had managed to do something no one else could: feed him without agenda, without fear, without any motivation other than the simple act of preparing food. When the meeting ended and the Marcelli family departed with handshakes and promises of cooperation, Vincent pulled his son aside. "What happened in the kitchen? You came back different." Marcus considered how to answer. "I found someone who knows how to cook." Vincent frowned. "Alessandro is one of the best chefs in the city." "That's not the same thing, Papa." As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Marcus glanced back toward the kitchen, where Elena was helping with the final cleanup of the evening. He had spent his entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from him or his family. For the first time, he had encountered someone who seemed to want nothing at all. The next morning, Marcus found himself thinking about Elena as he went about his usual routines. He attended a meeting with his father's accountant, reviewed security reports for their various businesses, and handled the dozen small crises that seemed to arise daily in their organization. But his mind kept returning to the simple plate of carbonara and the woman who had prepared it without fanfare or expectation of reward. That evening, he returned to Romano's earlier than usual before the dinner rush began. Elena was setting up tables in the main dining room, moving efficiently between tasks. "You're back," she observed without surprise. "I am. Would you cook for me again?" Elena paused in her work. "The kitchen staff will think it's strange if I keep cooking for you instead of serving tables." "Let me worry about the kitchen staff." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "What would you like?" "Whatever you feel like making." This time, Elena prepared something even simpler. Spaghetti with olive oil, garlic, and red pepper flakes. She added fresh basil at the end and a generous grating of Parmesan. Again, Marcus tasted only the food itself, clean and honest and satisfying in a way that elaborate preparations never were. "Why don't you cook professionally?" he asked as he ate. "Because I don't want to," Elena replied simply. "I like serving people. Cooking becomes different when you do it for money." Marcus paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" "When you cook for money, you start thinking about what people want instead of what's good. You worry about impressing them or pleasing them instead of just making food. It changes everything." Her words struck him with unexpected force. She had just described exactly what he tasted in every dish prepared by his father's chefs, the desperation to please, the focus on impression over substance. "So you just cook for yourself?" "And for friends sometimes. People I care about." She said this without any particular emphasis, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Marcus finished his meal in thoughtful silence. When he was done, he placed his napkin on the table and looked at Elena directly. "I'll be back tomorrow." "I'll be here." As he left the restaurant, Marcus realized that for the first time in years, he was looking forward to a meal. Over the following weeks, Marcus's visits to Romano's became a routine that puzzled everyone who noticed. The heir to the Romano Empire would arrive each evening, bypass the main dining room where elaborate meals awaited him, and head straight to the kitchen where Elena would prepare simple dishes that he devoured with obvious pleasure. Vincent Romano watched this development with growing concern. His son's behavior was becoming a topic of conversation among their associates, and not all of the talk was favorable. "Your boy's got it bad for that waitress," commented Tony Salvatore during a private meeting in Vincent's office. Tony had been Vincent's lieutenant for 20 years and rarely hesitated to speak his mind. "It's not what you think," Vincent replied, though he wasn't entirely sure what to think himself. "Boss, with respect, it don't matter what it is. People are talking. They're saying your son thinks he's too good for regular food, that he needs some special girl to cook for him. Makes you look soft." Vincent's hands tightened on his desk. In their world, perception was reality. and the perception that his heir was weak or entitled could undermine years of carefully built authority. That evening, Vincent decided to see for himself what was happening in his restaurant's kitchen. He arrived during the dinner rush and positioned himself where he could observe without being noticed. What he saw confused him more than anything else. His son, who had grown up with every privilege, who could afford any restaurant in the city, sat on a kitchen stool eating what looked like scrambled eggs with toast while talking quietly with Elena as she worked. There was nothing romantic in their interaction, nothing that suggested the kind of infatuation Tony had implied. They talked like old friends, comfortable in each other's presence without any of the tension Vincent had expected. "She makes you happy," Vincent said later, confronting Marcus in the parking lot outside the restaurant. Marcus looked surprised. "It's not about happiness, Papa. It's about the food." "The food?" Vincent's voice carried skepticism. "You're telling me you go there every night for scrambled eggs?" "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." Marcus hesitated, then decided to attempt an explanation. "When someone cooks because they're afraid of you, because they want something from you, because they need to impress you, it changes how the food tastes. Elena doesn't cook for any of those reasons." "Why does she cook for you?" "I think because I asked her to." Vincent studied his son's face, searching for deception or self-delusion, but finding neither. "That's it?" "That's it." Despite his confusion, Vincent might have let the matter drop if not for what happened 3 days later. Word reached him that members of the Torino family had been asking questions about Elena, looking into her background and family connections. The Torinos were small-time players trying to expand their territory, and they had been testing Vincent's organization for months, probing for weaknesses. Their interest in Elena suggested they saw an opportunity to exploit what they perceived as Marcus's vulnerability. Vincent called Elena into his office the next morning. She arrived on time, dressed in her simple work clothes, showing no signs of nervousness, despite the obvious gravity of the situation. "Sit," Vincent commanded, gesturing to the chair across from his massive oak desk. Elena sat without fidgeting or looking around the room. Her composure reminded Vincent uncomfortably of his son's description of her cooking. No fear, no desperation to please. "You're close to my son," Vincent began. "I cook for him sometimes." "Why?" Elena considered the question seriously. "Because he asked me to, and because he's the only person I've met who eats food the way it's supposed to be eaten." "What does that mean?" "Most people eat with their minds. They think about how much something cost, who made it, what it's supposed to mean. Marcus just tastes the food itself." Vincent leaned back in his chair. In 30 years of running his organization, he had learned to read people quickly and accurately. Elena wasn't lying or trying to manipulate him. She was simply stating what she saw as obvious facts. "Do you know who I am? What this family does?" "Yes." "Doesn't that bother you?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "My father was a construction worker. He built buildings for lots of different people, some good, some bad. He used to say his job wasn't to judge who lived in the buildings, just to make sure they didn't fall down. I feel the same way about cooking." The answer was so unexpected that Vincent found himself almost smiling. Almost. "Some people might try to use you to get to my son, to hurt this family. Then I'll stop cooking for him." Vincent blinked. "Just like that? I don't want to cause problems for anyone. If my cooking puts Marcus in danger, I'll stop." Her willingness to walk away without argument or negotiation struck Vincent as either remarkably noble or remarkably naive. He couldn't decide which. "There might be another way," he said slowly, "but it would mean changes for you." Elena waited for him to continue. "If you worked directly for the family, if you were under our protection, it would be harder for anyone to use you against us." What would that mean? Vincent outlined the arrangement. Elena would become Marcus's personal chef, with a substantial salary and living quarters in a secure building owned by the Romano family. In exchange, she would be available to cook for Marcus whenever he requested, and she would follow certain security protocols designed to keep her safe. It's essentially a job offer, Vincent concluded. But once you accept, it becomes difficult to change your mind. Elena was quiet for several minutes, thinking through the implications. Finally, she spoke. Can I still cook the way I want to cook? Simple food, nothing fancy? If that's what my son wants, then yes. And I wouldn't have to cook for anyone else? No big dinners or special events? Not unless you chose to? Elena nodded slowly. Then I accept. The transition happened quickly. Within a week, Elena had moved into a small but comfortable apartment in one of the Romano family's residential buildings. A kitchen was installed that met her specific requirements: basic equipment, good ingredients, no unnecessary complications. Marcus's reaction to the arrangement was complicated. He appreciated having regular access to Elena's cooking, but he worried about what the change might mean for her independence. You didn't have to agree to this, he told her during their first meal in her new kitchen. I wanted to, Elena replied, serving him a simple risotto made with mushrooms and herbs. Besides, now I can cook for you properly instead of stealing time in the restaurant kitchen. Properly? I can take my time, use better ingredients, not worry about the dinner rush. Marcus tasted the risotto and understood immediately what she meant. It was even better than her previous dishes, if such a thing were possible. The rice was perfectly creamy. The mushrooms had depth of flavor that spoke of careful selection and preparation. The herbs were fresh and bright. This is incredible, he said. Elena smiled, the first truly happy expression he had seen from her since they met. Good. I was hoping you'd like it. As weeks passed, their routine developed naturally. Marcus would arrive each evening after handling his daily responsibilities, and Elena would prepare whatever had inspired her that day. Sometimes it was Italian food that reminded him of his grandmother's cooking. Sometimes it was something completely different: French bread with good cheese, Spanish tortilla, even American comfort food like meatloaf and mashed potatoes. The key was always the same: simple ingredients, careful preparation, no agenda beyond the creation of something delicious. Word of the arrangement spread through the Romano organization, creating mixed reactions. Some of Vincent's men saw it as an expensive indulgence, hiring a personal chef for the boss's son. Others understood it as a security measure, protecting a potential vulnerability. Marcus began bringing Elena books about cooking, not elaborate French technique manuals, but collections of traditional recipes from various regions. She read them with interest, but rarely tried to duplicate the complex dishes they described. These are beautiful, she told him, flipping through a book about Tuscan cuisine. But they're not for me. Why not? They're trying too hard to be special. Food doesn't need to be special. It just needs to be good. This philosophy became the foundation of their relationship. In a world where everything carried hidden meanings and ulterior motives, Elena's cooking represented something pure and uncomplicated. The first real test of their arrangement came when Vincent asked Elena to prepare dinner for a meeting with the heads of 2 other families. It was a delicate negotiation involving territorial boundaries, and the meal would be part of the diplomacy. It needs to be impressive, Vincent explained. These men expect the best of everything. Elena listened carefully, then nodded. I understand. On the appointed evening, she served a meal that surprised everyone present. Instead of elaborate courses designed to showcase expense and sophistication, she prepared perfectly executed versions of simple dishes that reminded each man of his childhood. Handmade pasta with a sauce that had simmered for hours, bread baked fresh that morning, roasted chicken that fell off the bone. The visiting family heads ate with obvious pleasure, praising not the complexity of the cooking but its authenticity. Conversations that had been tense became more relaxed as men who spent their days scheming and calculating found themselves remembering simpler times. The negotiations concluded successfully with agreements that satisfied all parties. "How did you know to cook like that?" Marcus asked Elena later. "They were all trying so hard to impress each other that they forgot why they were really there," she explained. "Sometimes people need to remember what matters." Vincent, who had witnessed the entire evening, began to understand something about his son's attraction to Elena's cooking. In their world of constant manipulation and hidden agendas, she represented something increasingly rare, genuine simplicity. But even as the arrangement seemed to be working perfectly, forces beyond their control were moving that would soon test both Elena's resolve and the Romano family's ability to protect those they claimed as their own. The Torino family had not forgotten their interest in Elena, and Marcus's obvious attachment to her cooking had only increased their conviction that she represented a valuable target. They began making subtle inquiries, probing for opportunities to exploit what they still saw as a weakness in the Romano organization. At the same time, Elena's growing reputation within the family was creating its own complications. Other members began requesting her cooking for special occasions, and some of Vincent's business associates started asking about hiring her for their own events. "You're becoming famous," Marcus told her one evening as she served him a simple soup made with vegetables from the farmer's market. "That's not what I wanted," Elena replied, and Marcus could hear genuine concern in her voice. "What did you want?" Elena was quiet for a moment, ladling soup into her own bowl and sitting across from him at the small table in her kitchen. "I wanted to cook for someone who would appreciate it. That's all." As she spoke, Marcus realized that their simple arrangement was about to become much more complicated, and that the peaceful routine they had established might not survive the pressures building around them. The crisis came on a Tuesday evening in late October. Marcus had just sat down to dinner when his phone rang with an emergency call from his father's head of security. "They took the girl," came the terse message. 20 minutes ago. 3 men, black sedan, heading south on Michigan Avenue." Marcus felt his world tilt. "Elena?" "Yes, we're tracking them now." Within minutes, every available Romano soldier was mobilized. Vincent himself took command of the operation, his usual calm replaced by cold fury. Taking Elena wasn't just an attack on Marcus, it was a direct challenge to the family's ability to protect their own. The Torinos had made their move at the worst possible time for them and the best possible time for the Romanos. Elena had been returning from the farmer's market, accompanied by only one bodyguard, when the kidnapping occurred. The guard had been knocked unconscious but was alive, and several witnesses had seen the abduction. Within an hour, Vincent's network of informants and street contacts had identified the location where Elena was being held, an abandoned warehouse in an industrial district controlled by the Torino family. "We go in fast and hard," Vincent told his assembled men. "I want the girl back unharmed. And I want the Torinos to understand that this kind of move will not be tolerated." Marcus insisted on being part of the rescue operation despite his father's protests. "She's there because of me," he said. "I'm going." The warehouse assault was swift and efficient. Vincent's men had been planning for a confrontation with the Torinos for months, and they moved with the precision of a military operation. Within 15 minutes, they had secured the building and eliminated the immediate threat. They found Elena in a storage room on the second floor, tied to a chair but otherwise unharmed. She looked up as Marcus burst through the door, her expression showing relief mixed with something that might have been irritation. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked, cutting her bonds with a knife. "No," Elena replied, rubbing her wrists where the ropes had chafed. "Just annoyed. They interrupted my cooking." Even in the midst of the chaos, Marcus found himself almost smiling. Only Elena would be more upset about a disrupted recipe than about being kidnapped by a rival crime family. The aftermath of the rescue created new complications. 3 Torino soldiers were dead, and the family's leadership was demanding a meeting with Vincent to discuss terms. The kidnapping had escalated a simmering territorial dispute into something approaching open warfare. Elena, meanwhile, seemed remarkably unaffected by the experience. She returned to her apartment, completed the soup she had been preparing when she was taken, and served it to Marcus as if nothing had happened. "Aren't you scared?" Marcus asked as they ate. Elena considered the question seriously. "Of course, but being scared doesn't change anything. The soup still needed to be finished." Her matter-of-fact response made Marcus realize something important. Elena's calm wasn't the result of naivety or lack of understanding about the dangers she faced. She simply chose to focus on what she could control rather than what she couldn't. Vincent's meeting with the Torino leadership took place 2 days later in a neutral location. The outcome was swift and decisive. Faced with Vincent's superior organization and resources, the Torinos agreed to leave Elena alone and to respect the established territorial boundaries in exchange for avoiding a war they couldn't win. But the incident had forced Vincent to confront an uncomfortable reality. His son's attachment to Elena had created a genuine vulnerability that other families would continue to exploit if they sensed weakness. "This can't happen again," Vincent told Marcus privately after the crisis had passed. "Either she becomes fully part of this family with all the protection that entails, or she goes back to her old life where she's not a target." Marcus understood what his father was really saying. The halfway arrangement they had established wasn't sustainable. Elena needed to be either completely inside their world or completely outside it. That evening, Marcus sat in Elena's kitchen watching her prepare what might be their last meal together. She had chosen something simple: fresh pasta with a sauce made from tomatoes, garlic, and herbs from the small garden she had started on her apartment's balcony. "My father wants to know what we're going to do," Marcus said. Elena didn't look up from the stove. "What do you want to do?" It was, Marcus realized, the first time anyone had asked him what he wanted, rather than what was expected or required of him. In his world, personal desires were luxuries that could rarely be indulged. "I want to keep having dinner with you," he said honestly. Elena turned to face him. "Even if it means I have to become part of your father's world completely?" "Even then. But only if it's what you want too." Elena was quiet for a long moment, stirring the sauce while she thought. Finally, she spoke. "I've been thinking about something my grandmother told me once. She said that cooking for someone was the most honest thing you could do for them, because you can't lie about care or attention when you're preparing food. Either you care or you don't, and it shows in every bite." She served the pasta, the simple sauce coating each strand perfectly. "I care about cooking for you, Marcus. Not because you're Vincent Romano's son. Not because you can protect me or pay me, but because you eat my food the way it's supposed to be eaten. That's rare." Marcus tasted the pasta, and as always, he experienced the purity that made Elena's cooking special. No hidden agendas, no attempts at manipulation, just carefully prepared food made by someone who understood that cooking could be an act of genuine care. "If I stay, if I become part of this completely, will you still eat like that?" Elena asked. "What do you mean? Will you still taste just the food, or will you start tasting all the complications that come with being in your father's world?" It was a question Marcus couldn't answer with certainty. His unusual sensitivity to the emotions behind food had developed as a survival mechanism, a way to detect threats and false intentions. Would it disappear if Elena truly became part of his family, or would it evolve into something else? "I don't know," he admitted, "but I want to find out." Elena nodded, setting down her fork. "Then we'll find out together." The conversation with Vincent took place the following morning. Elena presented herself in his office with the same calm composure she had shown during their first meeting, but this time there was something different in her manner, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. "I want to stay," she told Vincent simply, "but I have conditions." Vincent raised an eyebrow. In his experience, people brought into the family's inner circle were grateful for the opportunity and didn't make demands. "I'll cook for Marcus whenever he wants," Elena continued, "and I'll cook for family dinners and business meetings when you need me to. But I won't cook to intimidate people or as part of any scheme to hurt anyone. Food is about nourishment and care, not about power." Vincent studied her face, looking for signs of naivety or misplaced idealism. What he saw instead was someone who understood exactly what she was agreeing to and had made peace with her decision. "Agreed," he said finally. "Anything else?" "I want to keep my little garden and I want to be able to shop for my own ingredients. Good cooking starts with good ingredients, and I know where to find them. That can be arranged with appropriate security." Elena nodded. "Then we have an understanding." The formal integration of Elena into the Romano family structure took several weeks to complete. Legal documents were prepared, security protocols were established, and living arrangements were upgraded to reflect her new status. She moved into a larger apartment in the family's most secure building, with a kitchen designed specifically for her needs and preferences. The change was remarkable not just for Elena, but for the entire family dynamic. Marcus began eating regularly for the first time in years, which improved his mood and energy levels noticeably. Vincent found that business dinners prepared by Elena were more successful than those handled by expensive catering services, as her food seemed to put people at ease in ways that elaborate preparations never had. Most surprisingly, other family members began requesting Elena's cooking for their own important occasions. She agreed to some requests and politely declined others, always based on her own assessment of whether she could cook with genuine care for the people involved. "She's changing how we think about food," Vincent confided to his wife one evening after a particularly successful negotiation that had concluded over one of Elena's simple but perfect meals. "How so?" "We used to use food to show power, the most expensive ingredients, the most famous chefs, the most impressive presentations. She uses food to show care. It's more effective than I expected." As autumn turned to winter, Marcus and Elena settled into a routine that satisfied both their needs and the family's security requirements. They had dinner together most evenings, sometimes joined by other family members, but often alone. The conversations ranged from cooking techniques to books to observations about the people around them. Elena's influence extended beyond the kitchen. Her calm pragmatism seemed to have a stabilizing effect on Marcus, who had always been prone to overthinking and anxiety about his role in the family. With regular, satisfying meals and the companionship of someone who expected nothing from him beyond appreciation for her cooking, he became more confident and decisive. The final test of their arrangement came during the Christmas season, when Vincent decided to host a gathering of all the major family heads in the city. It was both a celebration and a demonstration of the Romano family's continued strength and unity. Elena was tasked with preparing the meal for 30 people, including some of the most powerful and dangerous men in Chicago. Instead of being intimidated, she approached the challenge with characteristic practicality. "What do these men really want?" she asked Marcus as they planned the menu. "To feel important, mostly. To be treated with respect. Then I'll cook them the kind of food their mothers would have made, if their mothers had been really good cooks." The Christmas dinner became legendary within their circle. Elena prepared a feast of traditional Italian dishes, each one executed perfectly, but without pretension. Handmade pasta with simple meat sauce, roasted meats with herbs, vegetables prepared to highlight their natural flavors rather than disguise them. The gathered family heads ate with obvious pleasure, many of them commenting that the food reminded them of their childhoods. Conversations that might have been tense became warm. Old grudges were set aside, and new alliances were formed over plates of food that spoke of home and family rather than power and intimidation. As the evening wound down and the guests began to depart, Vincent found Elena in the kitchen finishing the cleanup. "Thank you," he said simply. Elena looked up from the dishes she was washing. "For what?" "For giving my son something I never could." Elena dried her hands and turned to face Vincent fully. "What's that?" "Peace with food, peace with himself. Maybe just peace." As Marcus and Elena shared a quiet moment later that evening, sitting in her kitchen with cups of coffee and the leftover panettone she had made for dessert, both of them understood that their unusual arrangement had evolved into something neither of them had expected. Elena had found someone who appreciated her cooking without trying to change it or exploit it. Marcus had found someone who could nourish him without wanting anything in return, except his honest appreciation. In a world built on complex negotiations and hidden motives, they had created something remarkably simple, a relationship based on the daily act of one person preparing food for another with genuine care, and that person receiving it with genuine gratitude. It wasn't a conventional love story or a typical crime family narrative. It was something more fundamental, a story about finding sustenance, both physical and emotional, in the most basic human interactions. Outside the kitchen window, snow began to fall on the city, but inside, Marcus and Elena sat in comfortable warmth, planning tomorrow's menu and looking forward to the simple pleasure of sharing another meal together.